Someone hurt you. Not once. Not as an isolated incident that you processed and moved past. Repeatedly. In patterns so consistent that at some point you stopped being surprised and started expecting it. The betrayal that arrived from the direction you trusted most. The abandonment that confirmed what you had been afraid to fully admit you feared. The person who looked directly at your vulnerability and used it. You survived it. You are here. You function. But something in the way you move through the world changed after those moments. A quality of openness that was present before, a natural, undefended availability to genuine connection, became guarded, became calculated, became the carefully managed presentation of someone who has learned that the full version of themselves is not safe to show until safety has been thoroughly established, and sometimes not even then. This video is not about healing in the way that word is usually used. It is about something more precise, more permanent, more structural. Carl Jung spent 50 years studying the specific mechanism by which one human being causes another to suffer, and the deeper mechanism by which the suffering becomes self-perpetuating long after the original cause has gone. What he found was not what the therapeutic tradition typically offers as consolation. It was something more demanding, more confronting, and ultimately more liberating than any comfort could be. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to show you the mechanism by which you were hurt, the mechanism by which you keep being hurt, and the precise internal shift that makes the second mechanism impossible. Not the healing of wounds, the removal of the architecture that generates them. The pain you experienced was real. I want to say that first before anything else, not as a therapeutic acknowledgement, as a precise statement of fact. What happened to you was real. The people who caused it were real. The damage was real. But here is what Jung understood that most people resist understanding because it requires something uncomfortable. The original pain, however real, however unjust, however completely the fault of the person who caused it, is not what is hurting you now. What is hurting you is the biological autopilot's response to the original pain. The nervous system, which does not have the capacity to distinguish between the memory of a threat and the presence of a threat, is running the original experience as an active danger assessment in every subsequent interaction that carries any resemblance to the conditions that preceded it. The same emotional register, the same posture, the same relational dynamic, the same quality of dependency or intimacy that was present when the harm occurred. And the biological autopilot, reading the pattern match, not the present reality, activates the full defensive response designed to prevent the original wound from occurring again. The withdrawal, the preemptive distance, the subtle but constant testing of whether this person will also eventually confirm the worst expectation. And here is the painful precision of it. That defensive response, the one designed to prevent being hurt again, is the mechanism that most reliably ensures being hurt again. Because the withdrawn self, that tests from a distance, that never fully arrives in connection because full arrival feels like the ledge of the original fall, creates exactly the relational dynamic that produces the experiences it is trying to prevent. The guardedness that prevents genuine intimacy creates the distance that feels like rejection. The preemptive withdrawal that protects against abandonment initiates the abandonment it feared. The self-protection that was designed to prevent repetition becomes the mechanism of repetition. Carl Jung called this the complex, an autonomous psychological structure formed around a significant emotional wound that operates independently of conscious intention, generating the same categories of experience in loop after loop until it is seen, named, and integrated. Until you make the unconscious conscious, his most essential instruction, it will direct your life, and you will call it bad luck with people. Subscribe to Hermetic Mind right now. This channel exists for the person who has survived enough to be done with surviving and ready for something different. Subscribe as the first act of choosing understanding over repetition. The complex does not form in a vacuum. Jung was precise about the architecture. When a significant emotional wound occurs, particularly in the early years when the nervous system is most formative and the capacity for critical evaluation is least developed, the psyche does something that is simultaneously protective and costly. It fragments. The part of the self that was present for the wound, the open, trusting, available version that did not know yet to protect itself, is placed in the shadow, not destroyed, placed there, behind the wall of the persona that reformed around the wound to ensure that version could never again be exposed to the conditions that caused it harm. The shadow of vulnerability. The part of you that was fully present, fully open, fully itself before the experience that taught it that being fully present, fully open, fully itself was not safe. And the persona that formed after, the managed, guarded, calculated self that presents just enough to function in relationships while never fully arriving in them, is not who you are. It is the scar tissue that formed around who you are. The protection that was necessary once and has become the prison that prevents the very connections it was designed to make safe. But this is only the surface. What I am about to show you is where the Jungian framework and the neuroscience of relational trauma converge into something so precise that it will change the way you understand every relationship you have ever had and every relationship you will have from this moment. The void. The state of consciousness that exists before the biological autopilot runs its pattern recognition, before the complex activates, before the defensive response mobilizes, before the shadow of vulnerability draws its borders around the present moment based on the template of a past that is no longer the current reality. In the void, in the genuine, practiced, body-level presence of a consciousness that has arrived in this specific moment without the autopilot's constant overlay of historical threat assessment, something becomes possible that the defended self cannot access. The direct perception of what is actually present, not what the pattern recognition should be here, not what the complex has determined is likely to be here. What is actually here? And the person who can perceive what is actually present, rather than what their wound-generated filters tell them to expect, is the person who can make genuinely different choices, not the same choices in better disguise, genuinely different, informed by the present rather than organized around the past. The law of reverse effort operates in the domain of emotional protection with the same precision it operates everywhere else. The harder the self-protection, the more vigilant the defensive response, the more elaborate the testing protocol, the more carefully managed the presentation, the more the complex is activated, the more the biological autopilot is running its threat assessment rather than its present moment perception. The relationships that form are shaped by the wound rather than by genuine contact. But a consciousness that has done its shadow work, that has turned towards the shadow of vulnerability and said, "I see what happened to you, I understand why you withdrew, and I am ready to bring you back," begins to broadcast a psychic frequency that is not organized around protection, that is organized around presence. And presence, genuine, undefended, shadow-informed presence, is the only state from which genuinely safe connection can be built. Not because the world becomes safe, because the self becomes whole enough to perceive the difference between what is actually dangerous and what merely resembles what was dangerous once. No one will ever hurt you in the way you have been hurt once you understand this. Not because people become different, not because the world becomes safe, because the mechanism by which the hurt was perpetuated, the complex running its loop, the biological autopilot overlaying the present with the template of the past,
the shadow of vulnerability creating the defensive distance that paradoxically generated the very experiences it was trying to prevent. That mechanism requires your unconsciousness to operate. It runs in the dark. It runs in the gap between what is happening and what you are perceiving. It runs in the space where the present moment is being interpreted through the lens of a past that is no longer the current reality. The moment you make it conscious, the moment you can observe the complex activating, name the defensive response as a response, trace the pattern back to its origin with the kind of clarity that sees it as a historical structure rather than a present truth, the mechanism loses its automaticity. Not immediately, not completely in a single moment, but progressively. With each moment of genuine present moment perception,